Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm your host, Hilmarie. Our guest today is someone who has led expeditions to the North Pole and boardrooms around the world. Hans Lagerweij is a global business leader, strategist, and author who spent decades transforming companies across the travel, tourism, and hospitality industries. Hans has seen it all, often from the very edge of the map. Today, he runs Flying Dutchman Consultancy, helping businesses align strategy with execution. He's also the author of The Why Whisperer, a guide for leaders who want to move beyond bossing people around and actually get their strategy done. I love that. Hans, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Wow, well said. And also great pronunciation of my name, which is not easy.
Well, let's get started on your early journey. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the dream growing up?
I grew up already with my parents and my family exploring the world, leaving this small little country called the Netherlands on holidays. And I think my first dream was to become a pilot, to see even more of the world. But unfortunately, my eyes were quite bad. And that was at that time a reason to be denied for any pilot training. Honestly, at that time, I was disappointed and didn't know what I wanted to become, what I wanted to do later. For me, it was such an important part of my life, and of course it's not on any CV, is that as a 15-year-old I started a Friday evening and Saturday job in a small do-it-yourself store selling nails and electric equipment. That made for me the biggest difference because I suddenly started being interested in why do customers buy a specific tool, a specific brand? How can I influence them? How can I understand their needs? And I got really into the commercial drive. And that has basically created the path forward for the rest of my life. From there, I started studying business administration. From there, I had first a career in fast-moving consumer goods. But that moment being, I called it in my book, the king of screws and nails at 16-year-old. Funny remark, but it was an important part of my life.
Wow, that's an amazing backstory. From loving to travel the world, I think that's a Dutch thing, wanting to be a pilot, and then that formative experience at 15 years old, working in a DIY store. I love that you called yourself the king of screws and nails. You could see that there was something driving consumer behavior and consumer decisions, and that then led you down the path of studying business administration. And then you also got into brand management in consumer goods. How did that then lead you down to getting involved in polar expeditions and cruise lines?
In those 9 years of fast-moving consumer goods, I learned a lot. I mean, it's a great learning school, especially if you talk about brand management, brand strategies, but also sales and sales management. And what I did, of course, with earned money was travel, travel, travel. And after 9 years of working in fast-moving consumer goods and switching between countries and roles, I really started to ask myself, is there more in life than toilet paper, shoe polish, managing, even diapers I've done in my life? I'm missing something. And at that time, I got approached by a recruiter working for TUI Travel. TUI Travel is, of course, Europe's, maybe even world's biggest tour operator, and now very much single branded. But at that time, they had this wonderful portfolio of adventure companies. And my first role for them was managing a small adventure travel company in Amsterdam. And from there, I switched indeed to a great company, Quark Expeditions, a polar expedition cruise company, taking guests to the North Pole and to Antarctica.
Wow, what a change in trajectory from working in brand management and strategy for consumer goods to now suddenly being involved in managing expeditions and going to the North Pole, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about your North Pole moment? What did it teach you about leadership when everything gets tough?
We chartered Russian nuclear icebreakers to go to the North Pole, which was probably one of the most spectacular trips. But for me, the most important trip that I made was actually my first trip to Antarctica. That's the other side of the world. And I was just managing that company, Quark, and I was a very young CEO and thought like, okay, I was still puzzling. How do you give direction? How do you manage? How do you show leadership? And especially in this case, where you have an office in Toronto, Canada, and a ship a long, long way from that office in Antarctica, how do you manage the guest experience, but also safety management on board of a ship so far away. I went on this trip. Unfortunately, we met a storm, and not just a regular storm, but a storm with that had hurricane type of winds. So interesting. So the captain decided, like, okay, we are on a small ship. We need to run for cover, and we run for cover in a place called Deception Island, a beautiful little island near Antarctica, which is actually a dormant volcano. So you can sail in with a small ship and you're basically into the volcano. And that's where he decided to run for cover. Could not run an anchor in that place because the winds were too high. So he had to sail small rounds in that dormant volcano. And at that time, I thought, like, guys, how do I ever think that I can just direct, instruct, for example, something like health and safety policies from my Toronto office to the team here, fighting these kind of circumstances. I guess that was the born of the idea of the why whisperer. And of course, it is influenced by a lot of authors like Stephen Covey and Simon Sinek. Like, how can you manage and lead teams so far away that have to, manage very, very challenging circumstances? And that was the moment when I, realized that being a bossy boss is not the answer. You need to inspire people. You need to trust people, and you need to set an overall direction, but involve everyone in creating a product, creating a plan for a company.
We're going to delve deeper into that in a moment. But your lived experience from seeing the difference on how things work and operate in an office in Canada is a very different experience to somebody on a ship in the Antarctica facing a severe storm. And I love that you had to get shelter at Deception Island. It sounds terrifying. What an experience. Then was that spark to write the book. Congratulations on your book, by the way, The Why Whisperer. As you just mentioned, and I also mentioned in the introduction, the book is a guide for leaders who want to move beyond bossing people around and actually get strategy done. So your take is that bossing people around doesn't work anymore. Why is that?
For so many reasons. Let's get to the first reason. If you boss someone around, that person will show up at work at 9, just do what that person is being told and leave as soon as the first opportunity arises. That's not a motivated employee. That's just someone that ticks boxes, manage what is being told and leave. That's not a motivated individual that really goes all the way for the company. But the second thing is also, it is such a waste of resource. It's just such a waste of knowledge and experience of that particular person. What I have learned is that the best ideas, the best plans are actually coming from the people carrying out the work. So yeah, that's this bottom-up idea on involving the teams, involving employees that not only motivates them, but also in the end creates the best plans. And it makes sure that, it's not your plan or your executive plan or the leadership plan. It actually will become the full team plan or the company plan.
Right. So if you want employees who are motivated, you need to involve them, rather than just giving them rules and then they just have to tick some boxes, because then they are not motivated. As you said, they're a wasted resource. Whereas if you can get them to buy into the idea so it becomes a team idea, then you're going to get a lot more out of it. What is the biggest mistake leaders make when trying to get buy-in for a new strategy?
You just said it. The word buy-in almost suggests you're selling something. So you're selling your plan or your strategy to the team. But selling is a process of incentivizing. So you pay them to a nice bonus to achieve your plan. They run for the money. They think probably because you're trying to sell something, it's even negotiable. You get a complete different situation than if strategy or the plan is something collective. It's not a buy-in. No, it's owned by everyone in the team and it's for everyone. I'm actually a bit allergic to the word buy-in. It also suggests already an us versus them dynamic.
Interesting. So you would steer clear of trying to get buy-in from employees. What is it then that we should be going after?
It's a beautiful word, is collective, shared ownership. That's the ultimate goal.
Excellent. So that means you would involve your team in different phases of the strategy. You wouldn't just create something and then try and shove it on them and say, now go implement. you would involve them at various stages of the process.
Exactly. And also make sure that, strategy is not an annual event. It should become a daily habit.
Excellent. Can you unpack that a bit more? What do you mean by that?
When I talked about to people that I'm writing a book and, what's the book about? And they say, it's about strategy implementation. You get so many reactions that are actually not so positive. So you get comments like, oh, that sounds boring. Are you sure? That's not very exciting. Especially, of course, with Dutch people like me who are very direct. Other reactions were, oh, wow, that's very complex. So it's a theoretical book. And I think all those comments are, well, first of all, a sign about the current perception about strategy, but they should all be wrong. A strategy should be exciting. It should be simple. Everyone should understand it. And it should be absolutely practical. And just this thought that, don't bother me with your strategy. I have to do my daily work. Well, actually, your daily work should be completely part of the direction of the company, of the strategy, of the plan. Otherwise, what value do you add? So I've got a lot of comments on this. A strategy that's not understood is a strategy that doesn't exist in my view. And the best strategy is a shared adventure, is not a solo mission of a CEO or of an executive team. And another important point that I always try to make is your strategy is only as good as the people believing in it.
I love the words that you choose, not a solo mission, but it's a shared adventure that sort of taps into your life as an adventurer around the world. But you are so right that people's perception of strategy can be quite negative because it's confusing, it's complex, it's boring, it's theory. And that's why people say, let me just get on with a job. I don't need a strategy. What's this waste of time talking about strategy? I know that you have developed a framework called the 6 C's. Can you walk us through them and how they help teams execute?
My 6 C's were influenced by when I was a young business administration student. I was fascinated by the 4 and became later the 5 P's. I have thought a lot about how can I create something similar to solve this strategy crisis, so to speak. The first C, it's actually a double C, it's clear communication. So this is about being able to explain the direction of the company or your vision in very simple language, not in a 100-page PowerPoint. I give an example of a method that you can use. It's what I call the reverse elevator pitch. So a 60 to maybe maximum 90-second pitch where you can summarize what your strategy is about. And there's more aspects about communication, but the first ground rule is keep it simple. Another part is two-way communication. So yes, as a leader, you should have a very clear view on the direction that you want to go to. But important is involve the team. So invite them in aspects of that strategy. Not the full company should be involved in creating the full plan. If you talk about, I want to build a brand awareness of my brand, that is a critical thing, then your marketing team should be involved in creating the plan to build that brand awareness. The first C is clear communication, which is keep it short, keep it two-way. Those are the most important aspects.
I know that one of the C's is celebrating small wins. Why do you think that's often overlooked in leadership?
That's my favorite one, and it's probably the most non-corporate one. But big wins, in the end, are a collection of small wins that maybe people not notice that well, but you cannot have those small victories go silent. It's actually super motivating to celebrate, create fun around achieving small milestones step by step. And a celebration, it doesn't mean that you give a huge corporate company party for every milestone, but it could be something simple as a cake or even a high five with the team, but celebrate it, create fun around it. They are super important.
Very, very important. Very good take. You mentioned when you were talking about clear communication, you mentioned the idea of the reverse elevator pitch. What makes it so powerful?
Of course, it's based on the elevator pitch. What I learned as a young, ambitious manager in fast-moving consumer goods, that if you end up in the elevator with the CEO, you better be able to pitch your idea to him or her. So this reverse one is actually me saying, now you're a CEO, now you have to pitch back to your team. You have to be able to sell your core idea in 60 to 90 seconds. The important thing is what you do after these 60 to 90 seconds. Because we as leaders, we like to talk and we like to keep talking. But the important thing is about that, in my view, about the reverse elevator pitch is after 60 to 90 minutes, shut up and listen and check and let the team play back that core idea to you to see if they really understood it and ask them how they can drive that direction, what their ideas are in driving that direction, and how they see their responsibilities in driving that direction. So, reverse elevator pitch, 60 to 90 seconds. Keep it simple, set your direction, but then shut up and listen, which is sometimes very hard for us.
Absolutely. I think that's very valuable advice because, like you say, it's easier to talk than listen. And it's almost you have to be so intentional about it to put out your idea, give them the pitch, but then listen and make sure that they understood every part of it instead of just continuing with the talking. Talking about listening better, how can tools like Parrot help CEOs stay in touch with frontline employees?
You address such an interesting point. So, when I was writing the book, of course, I came to the question to myself like, if you're a CEO of a company with 20,000 employees, how can you involve such a big team? How can you listen to a team of 20,000? And at that time, I didn't have the answer, but I already mentioned that I expected that with the development of AI, that techniques will become available to involve big teams and get a good sense of what's really living and what is really the core feedback from what I call the shop floor. So funny is that after I finished the book and it was published, I did interviews, I got actually approached by two guys from my home country, the Netherlands, that said, Hans, wonderful book. Can you have a look at what we are developing? And that was Parrot. Parrot is exactly what I had in mind when I wrote that paragraph in my book. It's an AI-driven system where even if you have 20 or maybe 100,000 employees, as a CEO, you can get a really, really good sense of ideas of about what's living, what do people feel a couple of levels down. And it's a system that's still in development, but being implemented now in a couple of Dutch companies. And I really believe this is a super valuable tool for everyone in the near future.
It makes absolute sense to tap into technology and to make use of the ability of AI, then to help crunch down and take what employees are saying. And as you said, whether there's 20,000 or 100,000, would be very hard for a human to sift through all the meaning of what's coming up. Using tools, you'll be able to really crunch it down to what the message is that your frontline employees are trying to get to you.
It's a wonderful opportunity here that technology should build bridges, not walls.
Very good. I like that. Technology should build bridges. Very, very good. Now, for our audience that's keeping track, we have mentioned 3 of the C's: clear communication and celebrating small wins. We don't have to dig into them, but what are the other 3 C's?
So the other one is consistent reinforcement. This is that what I was saying, that strategy is a daily habit, not an annual event. So it is repetition, it is connecting the vision to daily work, in behavioral expectations, in reward and recognition, etc. If you talk about reward and recognition, that's also related to my next C, which is culture or culture alignment. If you develop a plan, a strategy, a vision, culture can be your biggest friend or your biggest enemy. It should be aligned. If your plan goes against the culture of the company, you have a big problem. This is really about creating value alignment within the organization. The next C is continuous improvement. For me, this is also an important one because if we think that strategy is indeed an annual event, like we lock ourselves up in a room for a couple of weeks a year, and then we produce a 100-page PowerPoint in a lot of details, the issue is then when you start implementing, it could already be outdated. So that's why I'm a big fan of keeping strategy short and simple, start implementing it and optimize it, which is part, of course, of continuous improvement. The last C is maybe one of the most important ones. It's collaborative engagement. So collaboration, working together, teamwork, creating this opportunity for open dialogue and feedback. Probably also one important element here is, as a leader, lead by example.
Excellent. So we've got clear communication, celebrating small wins, consistent reinforcement, culture, continuous improvement, and collaborative engagement. Excellent. Definitely worth reading the book to go and dig into all these facets that you cover. What advice would you give to leaders trying to align their teams during periods of uncertainty or change?
During uncertainty, first of all, these 6 C's and direction becomes even more important. At the same time, especially if there's a crisis going on. So as a leader, you can't know everything. And even as an organization, you can't know everything. Don't create the impression that everything is sorted and how do you call it? A little bit like a fake certainty. And I give you one beautiful example. So I was also responsible for a portfolio of travel companies during COVID. That's probably the most horrible time ever for travel companies because we had basically 18 months, zero revenue. There was nothing happening. No trips were departing, no ships were sailing, hotels were empty. The important thing at that time is who knew when it was going to end? Nobody. If as a leader you create some kind of fake certainty, say, oh, this will be over in 2 months, you're lying because no one knew that at the time. So what you can do as a leader is explain the direction and making sure that the team and the plan is ready the moment the world opens again. And that's what we did. I still remember that once we started sailing again with the ship, we had probably 80 to 90% occupancy immediately because we were ready. We were so ready. And that was quite an important difference versus competitors that seemed to be completely surprised by the time of restarting operations again. And I didn't know when COVID would end, and no one knew that. But at least you can be ready. Going back to your question, the most important thing is don't lie, don't fake, don't create fake uncertainty. Be honest, be vulnerable. That's really not bad as a leader. Again, invite your team in to build that future.
I like that also, that even when things are unstable or uncertain, you can still plan ahead, create a plan for when that period passes so that you're ready to sort of hit the ground running. But also, I like what you said about being honest, being transparent. Don't lie, don't fake things out because not everyone knows everything and you can't predict how things are going to unfold as they happen. Now we have come to the segment of our show where I will ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Yeah, why not?
What is the coldest place you've ever been?
It was the North Pole, actually, because I was lucky enough one time to visit the North Pole in April in a Russian scientific camp mission. So it was -40, -50 at that time.
Wow, that is cold. One travel experience that changed how you see the world.
That's the beauty about good immersive travel, that every experience changed your way to see the world. But it was probably my first polar trip, which was to a place called Spitsbergen or Svalbard, north of Norway. Before that, I didn't know that these polar regions were so beautiful and so incredible. And the last frontier, the last untouched nature areas of this world. So that really changed my perception. And now I would rather go on a cold trip than on a warm trip.
Oh, lovely.
So to speak.
A book that every business leader should read.
For me, that is still Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits. Absolutely. Because also it is very practical. Everyone can learn from that book. And he was certainly an example for me writing The Why Whisper.
In your opinion, what is the most underrated leadership skill?
Ooh, that's also a good one. Let me talk about whispering is in my book. A lot of people think that leadership is about being loud. That's why I use the analogy of whispering. Whispering actually means being very close to your team. Not actually really whispering, but being close to your team and really understand what they feel and what they're thinking.
Describe how you approach challenges.
It completely depends on which challenge. If it's a business challenge, I'm still of very old fashioned that I like to go and search for the facts, for data, really to try to escape from potential emotions. That's not always possible. It doesn't always work that way. And certainly feeling and gut feel is important. But yeah, I'm really trying to go for data first.
And what is one thing that you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
Maybe not every day, but almost every day. I'm a runner. For me, running is absolutely the important thing in the day. I usually do it in the evenings. Could be just a half an hour, but that really empties my head. It empties my head from any thoughts or frustrations of the day. It clears my mind. It actually also gives me ideas for the next day. how to improve things, how to set direction for yourself. And then I come home and I can enjoy either my family, other aspects of life. So important. Doesn't have to be running, but I really recommend everyone to do some sports or physical activity, especially if you're in very stressful jobs.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for playing along. That was not too difficult. Now I would like to ask you our signature green pill question. What green pill advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, so many. The fun thing is that if you're young, you study your MBA, you think a leader rules the world. So I made a comment already. A leader is the loudest person in the room. So wrong was that assumption. But also the idea that as a leader, you have to know everything or you have to have an answer to every question. No, the critical thing is use the knowledge and the experience of your team to answer questions. You don't have to have an answer to every question. So I would keep it to that.
Hans, thank you for taking us on such a thought-provoking and exciting journey today. From icebreakers at the North Pole, facing storms at the South Pole, to breaking down barriers in the boardroom, your insights offer a powerful reminder that real alignment starts with asking the right questions and listening, not just giving the right answers. Before we close, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work?
I'm very active professionally on LinkedIn. I'm posting 3 times a week, a lot about travel and cruising in particular, but also at least one post a week about leadership and leadership development. So I would say follow me on LinkedIn. You can also go to my website. The challenging thing with my website is that you need to know how to spell my last name, hanslagerweij.com. And of course, you can look on Amazon or Barnes & Noble for my book, which is called The Why Whisperer, How to Motivate and Align Teams That Get Your Strategy Done.
Excellent. And we'll also put this in the show notes so that it's easy for the listeners to find.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show and leave us a 5-star review so that more people can discover these inspiring stories. Until next time, continue to lead with empathy, clarity, and purpose.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.